You want to get more out of your sauna. You want to get more out of fasting. Fasting and a sauna together enhance the effects of one another. And we're talking about from a longevity perspective, we're talking about from a metabolic perspective, and we're talking about even from a lactate clearance perspective. And I'll explain what all that means. This is really fascinating stuff. Essentially, fasting or caloric restriction and saunas give us a lot of the same benefit. Some via the same mechanisms and some via different mechanisms. So we're not only enhancing these pathways, but each one is providing a different pathway to get us more. So this is definitely something you want to be implementing. So let's go ahead and jump right in. The first thing that we have to look at is autophagy. Okay, when you look at the research, when you look at the data, fasting does not give a ton of longevity benefits unless autophagy is present. Now, that being said, fasting comes with a myriad of benefits as far as like insulin sensitivity goes, and that can potentially have an effect on longevity. But directly in the moment, it is autophagy that is the primary driver of the longevity benefits associated with fasting. So if we don't have autophagy, we're not getting an immediate potential longevity effect. Now, what does this have to do with a sauna? Okay, well, saunas also promote autophagy, but saunas promote autophagy via different pathways. You see, when we're fasting, we're promoting autophagy predominantly through what is called FOXO, okay? Now, we are activating this protein, FOXO, predominantly because we are under stress from severe caloric restriction. And what's funny is when you look from an evolutionary standpoint, what are the things that we would more than likely be exposed to as far as stressors thousands of years ago? Probably, of course, not eating food for long periods of time, exposure to heat, and also exposure to cold, okay? So kind of makes sense, even from a very basic standpoint. So when we are fasting, we're inducing autophagy one way. When we're sitting in a sauna, we're inducing autophagy via another way, via heat shock proteins. There was a study that was published in the journal Athletic Training that took a look at 30 minutes of sauna exposure in a relatively cool sauna, 163 degrees. That's not a hot sauna. Okay, they found that just 30 minutes at that temperature increased heat shock protein 72 by 46%. That is huge. Okay, and then these heat shock proteins, ultimately what they do, their job is to take proteins that have clumped, sounds weird, and make it so that they're not clumped. When we are forming cells and we are rebuilding, we don't want proteins to clump. That can lead to mutations, deformities, things that just aren't processing well. So we either need to declump them and reallocate them or get rid of excess proteins that don't need to be there. Heat shock proteins are what are called chaperoning proteins, and they chaperone those proteins to the right places. Now, this obviously has a powerful effect in tandem with intermittent fasting, where we are in a fasted period and activating other pro-longevity effects. You can see how together they work quite well. Then there was another study that was published in the journal Acta Physiologica. This took a look at 32 rats. Now, in these rats, they didn't put them in a sauna, they put them in hot water. But it wasn't even that hot. It was basically like taking a relatively hot bath. Okay? And they found that in these rodents, they had an increase in FOXO3, which is the same kind of protein that we're trying to upregulate via fasting, stress through caloric restriction. These proteins regulate genes that are associated with like DNA repair, with even stem cell function, immune function. Okay, so the more that we have in the way of FOXO3, the more that we are protecting our body from oxidative damage. Now, these FOXO3 proteins can also interact with what are called sirtuin genes, and sirtuin genes have a pretty strong association when it comes down to fatty acid metabolism, when it comes down to, again, protection from free radicals, from oxidative stress and things like that. So again, protective effects that really work in tandem well together. Okay, now let's talk about the brain for a minute. We've talked about how fasting has an effect on the brain in other videos before. Okay, fasting can induce what is called BDNF, or increased levels of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which allows for neurogenesis, more neurons to form. In fact, there was a study that was published in the journal Brain and Behavior that found that just intermittent fasting for 3 months actually would work at increasing levels of BDNF in the hippocampal region of the brain. Ordinarily, we would think we'd have to do long, prolonged water fasts or something. But just making an intermittent fasting lifestyle as part of your life, that has positive impact on the hippocampal region, which is the region of the brain that affects memory and quick recall and things like that. So by increasing neurons there, yeah, we're effectively getting more activity there. It's what we want. What about about being in a sauna? Where does that correlate? So there's a study that's published in the journal Hyperthermia that took a look at 20 minutes of hot water exposure with the head exposed, so head not underwater. Now with this, they measured their BDNF immediately after, 15 minutes after, and some other different time intervals. They found immediately after and 15 minutes after hot water immersion, BDNF levels were significantly higher. This is phenomenal stuff because it's showing that even in the short term, hot water can trigger this effect. You don't need to have BDNF levels elevated for extended periods of time to get a benefit. You have BDNF levels elevated for a short period of time and you get the neurogenesis benefit. So taking a hot bath or sitting in a sauna when you are in a fasted state could potentially enhance this effect, right? I do want to make sure no matter what you are doing, if you are fasting or saunaing, if that's a word, or a combination of both, it is critical that you still get electrolytes in. Okay, I just want to make as a safety mechanism. Fasting already depletes minerals. Okay, obviously sitting in a sauna, you sweat, you deplete minerals. So those lower levels of insulin, you're going to excrete more. So you can put yourself in a very dehydrated state. So drink fluid and add salt. And electrolytes are my jam. I use LMNT electrolytes because personally I just think they taste the best, but I like 1,000 milligrams of sodium, very sodium focused. Sodium is the one that I really pay attention to because it's going to hold a lot of the other minerals together in terms of fluid balance in your body. So if I'm going to go sweat my buns off in a sauna, I want maybe even 2,000 milligrams of sodium, so I'll take 2 electrolyte packets from LMNT. So the cool thing is, not only are they perfect for fasting, they're perfect for a sauna, but they have the right mineral balance of sodium, potassium, and magnesium. And when you use that link down below, because I'm a VIP partner with them and they've been a sponsor on this channel, you get a free gift along with your purchase of electrolytes. So you get to choose your electrolytes, but then you get a free sample pack that has 1 stick of every single LMNT flavor. So you can hoard it for yourself and be greedy, or you can give it to a friend that wants to try out LMNT. But the bottom line is you're not going to find it anywhere else with the exception of a few people that talk about LMNT. So that link is down below, drinklmnt.com/Thomas. Trust me, the lemon habanero or the mango chili while sitting in a sauna is only going to elevate your experience. So that link is down below. The next piece we have to look at is surrounding prolactin and norepinephrine's effect on the brain. Now, I'll talk about specifically what those do mechanistically in just a minute, but there was a study that was published in the European Journal of Applied Physiology and Occupational Physiology that took a look at the effect of fasting when it came down to prolactin levels in the brain and norepinephrine. They found that all it took was sitting in a sauna at 176 degrees, which again isn't super hot. All it took was that to increase levels of norepinephrine by 310%, and get this, increase prolactin levels by 900%. Norepinephrine is like our fight or flight response. That's going to increase blood flow to the brain. Combine that with the BDNF we talked about, and that's a win-win. But prolactin promotes myelin growth. Myelin is what creates like the superhighways of transmission between neurons. So more myelin means more actual like communication between neurons. Additionally, prolactin may have a powerful neuroinflammation protective effect, meaning it protects the brain from inflammation that could be occurring within the brain. Okay, so that's on the heat shock side of things, the heat stress. What about the fasting side of things? There are some studies that have demonstrated that when subjects are fasting, following an intermittent fasting lifestyle, there's a 55 to 60% increase in norepinephrine compared to those that are not intermittent fasting, and that is regardless of carbohydrate intake. So simply by intermittent fasting, regardless of whether you're eating high carb, low carb, no carb, whatever, still triggered that 55 to 60% increase in norepinephrine. So there's that clear tandem benefit there. Again, we're talking parallel benefits, but also perpendicular benefits that intersect at certain points in time. Now, one of my favorite categories to talk about, the world of lactate. Lactate is a byproduct of anaerobic metabolism. It's like when you work out intensely, you reach that point in which you get that burn and you can no longer continue. That burn, well, in a way is lactate. It's actually hydrogen, but that's a different story. The point is, it's that lactic acid burn that we always call it. So lactate is what really drives a lot of fatigue, or at least the feeling of fatigue as far as a signal goes. Lactate's also a signaling device, but that's, again, it can get complicated if you want to go down that rabbit hole. Point is that being in a fasted state helps us clear lactate faster and ultimately use lactate more efficiently as a fuel source. Now, being under heat stress or exposure to high heat and heat acclimation can have a similar effect. But here's a really interesting study for those of you that might be questioning fasted workouts, because there's a lot of naysayers out there. There was a study that was published in the Pakistan Medical Association. It took a look at fasted versus non-fasted as far as lactate clearance after a workout. So they took a look at subjects that were on a watt bike, like a bike, and they had them go at 100 watts, and then every 2 minutes they increased the wattage by 25 watts. And they had them do this all the way until failure, okay? At the end of the ride, they had one group consume 600 milliliters of a glucose beverage, and they had the other group remain fasted. Now what they did is before the ride and after the ride and various intervals after the ride, they measured their lactate levels. And they wanted to see how quickly subjects could clear lactate. Well, in the fasting group, 84% of the fasting group was able to clear 50% or more of their lactate after 30 minutes, by 30 minutes. In the non-fasted group, there were only 46% of participants that were able to clear 50% or more of their lactate by 30 minutes. What is this telling us? This is telling us that some way or another, remaining in a fasted state could actually allow you to clear out the lactate faster. This means that your body is getting efficient at using the lactate as fuel. There is a common misconception that lactate clearance just means you are literally clearing out lactate and you're excreting it. No, better lactate clearance means that your body has the ability to use lactate as a fuel source. So lactate, a byproduct of exercise and anaerobic metabolism, can actually be turned back into glucose through what's called the Cori cycle in the liver. When this happens, the body uses this lactate, turns it into glucose, and you now have a new fuel. If you are more efficient at utilizing that lactate, you are more efficient at utilizing and creating fuel from thin air, practically speaking, right? Now, what about heat stress? There was a study that was published in the Journal of Comprehensive Physiology that took a look at just this, and it found that, well, exposure to high heat increased blood flow, which not only increased lactate clearance, but it also increased nutrient delivery to the tissues. So this is a short-term effect, but the more that we can get acclimated to heat, the more that we get efficient at utilizing lactate once again. So we don't want to look at using a sauna as just what we get in a short term. If our body becomes efficient and understands that as soon as we're under heat stress from exercise or from a sauna, because they both induce heat stress, we need to vasodilate, we need to upregulate these processes to get nutrients and blood flow to the area, and we need to upregulate processes like being able to be more efficient at the Cori cycle and utilizing lactate, the more that we can get out of our fasted workouts. So that's how they work in tandem. So sitting in a sauna when you're fasted can help the lactate clearance, but being fasted after a workout can also improve your lactate clearance. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel, and I'll see you tomorrow.